areas over to that response. But I don't want to set fear upon everybody's heart. We're still coming. The fire department is always going to, that door's always going to go up and someone's always going to be coming. But there are response time challenges. There's no way around it. So,
are we not covering this for, would you mind if I stream?
oh, I
For
know.
the people who can't attend? Okay.
No, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I just started going.
There's the scenario of, well, now that 21's out, what happens when there's something?
That's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. So no engine 21 is left. We still have paramedic unit 6 here, which is that's the lifeblood of a serious medical run as a paramedic unit for the advanced life support. But they don't have water or hose or firefighting capabilities, and they're far too busy to be trying to pretend to do that anyway. They have very basic equipment, fire extinguisher, that sort of thing. They have helped in the past. When you have a paramedic unit pull up and they're alone, they're still firefighters. They can still throw their gear on. They can try to make a grab. It gets more dangerous if you don't have fire hose and water and ladder companies to assist with. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on at a fire. And just before you came in, we were talking about, it looks like organized chaos, and it really probably does. When you're in the middle of it, everybody knows where everybody else is, and we're tracking all that. So that's a very good thing. We're talking about the impacts of, and we all know it. I'm not saying any big state secret here. We know we've had declining resources for many years here in the city, but also the Milwaukee Fire Department has suffered tremendously, and it has impacted response time. So engine 21 here, you can see that top left box there. You can see that the run totals between 2010 and projected for 22, you can see those are all up. You can see paramedic unit number 6, same exact thing. Everything's trending up. The station as a whole, which is on the left side in the middle, everything's trending up. The citywide run totals, and you got to look at the scales. There are different scales down the left side, but you can see the citywide run totals are also trending up. Now that's not citywide run totals because we have less resources. That is on its own. Citywide requests for fire and EMS resources continue trending upwards. Imagine then, as we have continued reducing resources, that has a magnifying impact on the folks that are left to do that work, right? And certainly the bottom two charts speak for themselves. You can see we've reduced firehouses and we've reduced apparatus fairly significantly. On the back side of that page, there's a map, and the big red feature in the middle, that's this fire station, engine 21. And the light, the kind of brighter green right around that is, these are GIS, drive time accurate response areas. That's why they're all jagged, because obviously if we're on North Avenue, we get a little further than if we're on a side street. So on those thoroughfares, arterials, freeways, you can get a little further distance. But you can see there that 0 to 4 minutes, that gets you to a decent amount of places. Now when you look at that dark blue, now we're in the 4 to 6 minute response area. Every response time map in the world assumes that the fire engine or the paramedic unit are available in headquarters when they're going to respond. And what do we know right now? We know right now engine 21's not here. So if there's a house fire 2 blocks away, or God forbid there's somebody having a heart attack a block this way, to get that BLS service there, we're going to be bringing them in from another area. Now, people may think that sounds like contrived information. I will tell you that's physics and geometry. We can only move these vehicles so quick to respond, and we have distances to cover. We can't overcome that. It is what it is. That blue area, that 4 to 6, when people have a heart attack and they're not breathing and their heart has stopped pumping blood throughout their body, that 4 to 6 minute range is a key area, because if we haven't started CPR, we don't get our BLS companies, our engines and ladder trucks on scene to start CPR and start ventilations, and then we don't get our ALS, our paramedic units in there to really start putting medications on board to resuscitate a person. that 4 to 6 minute range, we start to see a crossover statistically where we're either not going to be able to resuscitate, or we're going to resuscitate somebody who has a very poor quality of life. Beyond that dark blue, you can see that light green. That is 6 to 10 minutes, or excuse me, 6 to 8 minutes. And now we're getting to a outside range where you can see the obvious impacts based on my previous example. Now, what I'd like to point out on this map, and we did this on purpose, if you look right around the edge of that blue on the left side of the station, the outside edge of that blue, you can see, I think I'm seeing that right. Yeah, you can see on Titonia and Locust, that we've got engine 30. There's a smaller red little fire thing. If you look straight down or to the south, you can see engine 1 and engine 2. So each of these stations, they're not super highlighted, but each of these stations you can see have their own response areas. And they should, hey, come on in. Come on in, have a seat. Hey, does anybody want any coffee, by the way?
No.
I got water bottles too.
Water bottle?
Water
Yeah,
is fine.
please.
Yeah,
Water.
Water is fine.
You're welcome to have a seat or stand, whatever you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You can see these other fire stations that make up the periphery. They have their own response areas. And the idea is, if we had all of that brighter green coverage and every fire, let's be ridiculous with it for a second. If we had a fire station on every city block, that would be, everybody would look and go, wow, that's like way too dense of coverage, right? Now we're not being at all efficient. If we had one fire station in all 96 square miles of the city, everybody would agree, yeah, that's not enough. The balance is hard to strike based on geography and on run history. We have, in the city of Milwaukee, we have the busiest, bar none, the busiest. We have the busiest fire engines, ladder trucks, heavy rescues, paramedic units in the state, bar none. So they're running. Remember what I said, every one of these models assumes somebody is in that fire station waiting to respond. You're sitting here right now, there's not a fire engine here because they're out covering in a different area. They just left, I think, just before you got it. So, jump to the next one. I wanted to highlight so that everybody understands, what does engine 21 and med 6 do? What are their top 10 run types? And if you look on the big box on the bottom left, the top one is breathing problems. That is the number one most, it's the reason cited most for emergency medical services in Milwaukee. And people ask why. Well, first off, we have a ton of people with respiratory problems or lung disease of some sort. But it also is a symptom that accompanies a whole bunch of other maladies. You could be having a heart attack, and maybe all you notice is you're having trouble breathing, but technically it's a heart attack. So it comes along with a bunch of other issues. And then you can see down below that there's chest pain, sick, et cetera, et cetera. You get about 6 or 7 down, you can see traffic collision. Those have certainly been climbing. And then fire alarms. There's, if you get over just a little bit to the east here, you start to get into some light industrial or commercial areas, larger, older buildings with aftermarket alarm systems have been put in, and we do a ton of that work too. On the right side then, you can see the top box, Narcan. In 2021, this fire station administered in one form or another Narcan 197 times. When we administer Narcan, it is life-saving. And anybody that's done it or has witnessed it, you understand what I'm talking about. It happens right now. And the scourge of Narcan is it depresses people's inborn ability to breathe. So you can get there and someone looks absolutely dead, blue, and not breathing, and you give them some of that, you do a few respirations for them, and you can literally bring the dead back to life with Narcan. And I'll tell you what, I don't pretend to know how difficult it is to battle addiction, but I can tell you that we're not going to get people to rehabilitation if we can't keep them alive. It's critically important. So we have Hope Kits in every Milwaukee firehouse, every engine, every paramedic unit. A Hope Kit has Narcan, nasal Narcan, a CPR mask. It has fentanyl test strips. If you want one on the way out, feel free to grab one. This is something we're doing to just try to keep people alive. We're finding that sometimes people don't want to call 911 in this circumstance because they're afraid because there's illicit drugs involved and they don't want to get in trouble for that. We're just saying, listen, let's put all that aside. We're just trying to keep people alive. You can see the car accidents here. These car accidents include your run-of-the-mill fender bender all the way through the ridiculous rise in absolutely horrific traffic accidents that result in numerous deaths, maiming. We've had a lot of, we have a run type that we call an auto extrication. An auto extrication signifies that we'll be using what everybody refers to as the jaws of life. We'll be cutting the car out from around the person. We have many vehicles that have started on fire as a result of the violence of the accidents. That they're just smashing components in the car apart so bad. The next one down, assault, shooting, stabbing. These are penetrating trauma. So in 2021, 199 times companies here responded. Those are your shootings and stabbings. It's too much. And if I may, and I don't think I said I would call you out if you popped up at one of these, but the two folks at the end of the table are actively working to minimize the occurrence of violence and the impacts of violence in this city. And I'm telling you, we need all hands on deck. And your help and your dedication to actually getting in the middle of it in the community is much appreciated. So I just don't want that to go unsaid. I really appreciate you coming here and just being here. Thank you. Then the bottom one, the incidents of fire. In 2021, they responded to 225 fires. That may seem like a lot, and it is a lot. It is a lot of fires. One fire is a lot if it's your house on fire. So then, as we move on, I want to talk a little bit because we are in an area where this is starting to have an impact. Shared services in Milwaukee County. So firefighters, we get a rap of being super slow to adapt, we're resistant to change. We get all these things. I would reframe it as we're resistant to ill-conceived change that very obviously is not really going to have merits. And so I would like to give you a solid example of something that fire chiefs throughout Milwaukee County got involved in and created from nothing. Shared services. What is shared services? Right now, I could pick the radio up. I can double the size of the Milwaukee Fire Department because we have warmed up what were long dormant relationships with every other fire department throughout Milwaukee County, and they us. We all kind of met in the middle and said, "Hey, why don't we work together?" And nobody could remember. It was some like old timer stuff that nobody was really aware of. So we started building this. This goes back 10, 11 years, and we've got a formal method of sharing resources across the border. This is important when one community is having either a super large or multiple large complex emergencies, or you have a major event. Let's say we have horrible example because we haven't had one here in knock on wood, but if we have a tornado come through multiple communities, the fact that the fire service works seamlessly across these boundaries so that where it is the worst gets the closest, most appropriate resources is critically important. So I desperately need for shared services to continue, right? And I think they would say the same thing. They want to have it continue as well. But we have to be good partners, right? And so if you take the city as a chunk and you take all the suburban communities as one entity, the red line is the number of times we've requested them into the city. Green line is the number of times they've requested us. So they trend roughly the same. And there's a spread there of maybe about 250 runs across 2022 projected. I don't think anybody would be too worried about that spread because that's spread around all those communities. However, each individual community, especially those that butt right up against us. Now around here, we're sort of landlocked. You're surrounded by other Milwaukee Fire Department fire stations. But you don't have to go too far across the river, and now you're butting up against the North Shore Fire Department. And so let's talk a little bit about how this might impact things. And I'm going to rip through some of these because some of them are so far away from here, and the numbers are a little bit small. So Cudahy, we go there more than they come here. There's reasons for that. They're a smaller community. two stations, when they need help, when they have a fire and they need the 4 engines, 2 ladders, etc., they're calling from a whole bunch of communities to include us. When we need help, we are starting with a larger initial bench. And the communities between us and them get drawn on first. Cudahy doesn't butt up against us. So the same is roughly true for Franklin. And you got to look at the scale on the left. These are not huge numbers. Nobody's losing their mind over this. Greendale, same thing. We track the same. You can see around the year 2020, they skyrocketed. How are you doing? Oops. I get that reaction a lot. I'm sorry. Greendale joined this consortium in 2020. There were a number of communities that joined up a little bit later than the rest, and now everybody's in. It's really good. Now we look at Greenfield. So I'm only bringing this up because in 2020 something must have happened, because all of a sudden we crossed and we're requesting them way more than they're requesting us. So we used to have a ladder truck on 56th in Oklahoma, truck 17. So that was one of the 8 ladder trucks that went out of service in the course of the past 10 or 15 years. Now, ladder trucks are responsible for search and rescue in fire areas, over fire areas, popping holes in roofs so firefighters can get in there to extinguish fires, putting ladders up so that either they can rescue people or firefighters, if they get pushed down on and can't get back to their exit, they can get down a ladder instead of jumping from a window and hurting themselves. On top of a whole bunch of other lesser dramatic things that certainly impact quality of life for civilians. Well, we shut down truck 17 at 56 in Oklahoma, and Greendale's ladder truck started picking up all of our ladder work right there. And you can see that happen right there. Now, they didn't have a big heart attack about this. I bring it up because the relationship worked in our favor in that case, right? Mm-hmm. They're coming and helping us when we're stricken, we have our time of need. They're going, okay, we'll send the truck. We continue along here. Hills Corners, again, we don't butt up against them, smaller community. They joined up in 2020. And then beyond that, Milwaukee County. Milwaukee County is a little different animal. They cover Milwaukee County, Mitchell Airport. So they are largely federally funded. There's all kinds of FAA regulations. They have to mostly stay on the airport grounds. But where might we use them? We might use them if you have a fuel tanker tip over on the freeway and ignite. They're arriving with, you ever seen those big airport fire trucks? They're mammoth, carry thousands of gallons of water and foam. And when we need them now. So they've come into our city a number of times. Then we get into the North Shore. I mentioned that before. You can see we track roughly the same, so I'm feeling okay about these numbers. We're starting to pull away from them a little bit, meaning we're pulling them in more than they're requesting us. So we want to keep our eye on that. Oak Creek, again, it's a community down on the southeast corner of the county. They're requesting us more than we're requesting them, and the numbers here aren't anything scary for either one of us. South Milwaukee, again, we don't butt up against them directly, so lower numbers. St. Francis, you can see here, we have another flip-flop on these numbers. What might have happened? St. Francis began sending their ladder truck into our community because we used to have in Bayview a ladder truck on Kinnickinnick with engine 11. That's one of the ladder trucks that got shut down. St. Francis has been doing a lot of our ladder work on the southeast end of the city. Again, as your fire chief, I'm extremely, extremely happy to have these relationships and to maintain the strength of these relationships. Then you get over to Wauwatosa. Now, doesn't have an enormous impact here perhaps, but we just saw engine 21 leave these quarters on a 911 call to go to 13th and Reservoir, which is several engine areas over. You don't have to make too many more leaps, and we're now starting, it's like ripples in a pond, right? You throw a pebble in a pond before these, this engine's out on a run, that engine's out on a run, that engine's out on a run. We all of a sudden can be dealing with something that seems very remote, but that's the nature of the system. We get the closest, most appropriate. We do request Wauwatosa more than they request us, and we want to keep an eye on that. West Dallas, same exact thing. Now, these calls, that I've shown you here, these are all basically fire type responses. If we add into the pile the EMS, the emergency medical services responses, and this is what I mean by maintaining healthy relationships here. When we had a private ambulance company just pick up stakes and leave town with next to no notice, it left a huge swath of underserved area even less served. There was no private ambulance to cover a huge chunk of the northwest side of Milwaukee. The result of that was the fire department overnight had to just absorb a whole bunch of wait time. So when you would call for a medical emergency, you always, anybody wonder why you get a fire truck on a medical emergency? Because every fire engine and every ladder truck and heavy rescue has, at a minimum, everybody's an emergency medical technician, basic, an EMT. And they provide basic life support. So they can handle all of your lower level stuff, but they are a key component in the serious stuff, because when our paramedic unit, this is the folks from paramedic unit 6 here, when they arrive on scene, they have to do all the advanced techniques. Somebody has to do, when we talk about that CPR, right? That's your basic life support. Those folks are doing CPR, they're ventilating a patient, they're scrambling back and forth, getting stretchers and tarps to move people when we're going to transport them. There's a whole ton that goes into that. Because nobody ever has a medical problem in the most convenient space in their house.
Right.
They just don't. They're always in the attic way up in the front, right? And so a lot of moving parts there to get that patient to the hospital. So people, and we've been asked this over and over. Everybody here has been asked if you pull up on a fire truck, what are you guys doing here? We didn't call for oh, there goes Med 6.
Engine 1, Med 6, unconscious diabetic, 814 West Wisconsin Avenue. Unconscious diabetic, 814 West Wisconsin Avenue.
So, because we only have the 12 paramedic units, they're centrally deployed around the city. The paramedic unit assigned here isn't just for this engine company. They're going wherever they're needed. Right now they're needed on 8th in Wisconsin for, it sounds like, a diabetic emergency. Now there is, on that map, there's truly nobody in this station as we speak, as far as response capacity. So we show up because we can initiate that emergency, immediate life-saving care. The paramedic units, since we have the 12 of them, one of them will come in and they can take that to the next level, and then we help them transport. So when the ambulance company on the northwest side shut down, we really ended up in a fix where we would go on a run that we use the private ambulance companies to transport for. They handle the lower acuity issues, but there were none of them available because an entire chunk of the city just, that company disappeared in a very busy area of the city. The remaining 2 private ambulance companies stepped up as much as they could, but it's not, you don't just flip a switch and magically have more ambulances and staff. So we would sit there waiting, and what we ended up doing was using our paramedic units, which are the top tier of emergency medical care, to come and transport basic life support calls just to get the runs processed, because we didn't have another way to get people to the hospital. When that happened, the suburban paramedic units were covering all of our ALS, not all of it, but much of our advanced life support work, the serious stuff. So we were constantly moving the pieces around to just try to keep the system from collapsing. They did that seamlessly, and stresses and strains on all departments in all directions being what they were, if we didn't have those relationships, that would have, I don't even want to pretend to know what would have happened there. So that's, I'm like way probably deep into like super like technical stuff or whatever, but let me just stop. Do you guys have questions? Anybody have any questions about?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Be happy to take them.
Okay. Compliment is, first of all, I've got a horse stroke too. First of all, congratulations on maintaining and developing those relationships with surrounding firehouses so that you all could collaborate in not so great circumstances. And we're not here having a meeting of confusion
Sure.
and people wanting to sever those ties. Because if that happens along with the cutting of engines and firehouses, we'd be in trouble just from this chart that you developed here. My concern is when you talk about what a run includes, and it's not just fire. If you look at this graph that you have here, it's making folk think that it's coming down. It's not as much as it was in 21 and 22, and the year's not over yet, so you can't total it all up. This is so far this year. So here's the other thing, and I don't know if I have a question as much as I have a concern. The audience that is here today, is this the audience that needs to be involved in hearing this? We're over here in this River West sort of, Harambe, sort of affluent kind of area. A lot of people move back over here and move families out to build the houses up and things like that. Do they know that we're having this meeting? And if they don't we need to start knocking on doors and saying to people that the Home Safe program that the city of Milwaukee has is informative enough that you can find out the preventative things that you need to do. The Red Cross has decided not to come to certain areas because the volunteers, they don't have enough. I don't know if that changed, but
It did change.
there was a few years when that was an issue. So I think, and what is disappointing me, because I thought you were joking when you said that the truck had to go to 13th and Reservoir
No, that actually happened.
for a situation, because that's where I work, and on a daily basis I reside, and there's a big firehouse there that if it had a truck, it could have tended to what's happening in the area. And I would like to know on the chart how often are those trucks going from here to there, and where else is that happening? Because on my way here, on 24th and Locust, yellow tape was all taped off between the alley and the street, and I didn't see any paramedics or anybody, so I don't know if that meant anybody wasn't hurt or they might have been moved or transported before I got there. But my concern is that, I hope I'm making sense. My concern is that I think we're gonna have to do like some of the suburban and wooded areas, and you're gonna have to try to find volunteers that are willing to do what firefighters do, right on their own block. Somebody's gotta have a key to the hydrant in case they gotta hook a hose up that come from their garage to start the process of putting the fire out till the fire trucks can get there, just in case they're tied up on 13th and Reservoir, where a firehouse is that's not operable. So for the life of me, I was thinking all the day, so what are you gonna do with an empty fire truck? Turn it into a beer garden or something? What is it gonna become, a museum or a house where kids can come and ride, play on it? It's there, it's sitting, what do you do with that? But also at the same time, if the neighbors don't know, because if this is just definitely gonna happen, there's nothing we can do about and getting rid of the fire trucks. We have to talk about the alternatives, the Home Safe program, training. People, I remember a fire on 9th and Ring we had. 11 people were in the house in the fire, and there was a gentleman who did some EMT training there, and he was riding past in a car. He hopped out of the car and he mobilized all of us to make a people line, and we were able to get all 11 people out of the house into covers because it was cold, and I had some granola bars and some bottled water in the house, and the kids, to keep them happy, we gave them that. And by the time the fire truck got there, they only had to put the rest of the fire out, but we did it. And I'm telling you, there was some talk at one point about putting those emergency houses in the neighborhood with the police and the firefighters. But I think you're gonna have to start some sort of program to see who's interested in learning how to do what a firefighter does. But I'm afraid that if you do that, and it starts panning out to be good, then they'll really think we don't need the firefighters.
Well,
They don't think they can just develop a volunteer program, and I think it's ludicrous. Is anybody here from the city? Who's
No.
reporting back to the city these meetings and what's going on? Are they gonna see the tape?
We are.
You are. I mean, and I'm saying that in a way to say that one of my statements to our mayor or whomever, to my alderman or whomever, would be, if you're concerned enough, I want to cuss, but I won't. It's on tape. If you're concerned enough to close it down, why wouldn't you be concerned enough to come and see why you should keep it open? And hear from the people that it's going to affect. Do we have to start some letter writing campaign and do something? Because if the people united can never be defeated, who mobilizes that? I mean, organizations like mine, maybe organizations like Vaughn, who does surveys, and because we got to knock on the doors and say to the people, do you have smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors? Do you know what that brown is on your electrical outlet? Do you know that bent up cords need to be replaced? And then we need to have a resource center where people that don't have, not to talk so much, I'm sorry, we need to have some sort of resource center or house so that people that don't have the means to go and replace that can come and get it, just like they can the rakes and the garbage bags when they have a citywide cleanups.
Yep.
I'll stop there.
Well, Andre, man, I could talk with you for hours. I wanna be fair and say that and I was talking with the young lady from the news before that.
What news is that, Journal City?
CBS 58.
CBS 58.
Say hi to Amanda.
Will do.
But this is not something we normally have done. This is kind of new for us to like open the doors up and say, come on, come all. And we did get a little bit of a late start on publicizing this and on making sure that everybody was invited. Everybody was invited, but it was a little bit late. So I want to be fair to the folks from the city and the alders in the mayor's office and stuff, that like they can only be in so many places at once. And we were a little bit, this was really for us to interact with the community. If they were to show up, that'd be great, but I just want to be fair to them that we were kind of putting this together as we went. But I will tell you this much, this has been super valuable for us that I think we're gonna just keep this going year round.
Well, fair might be a follow-up, a one-sheeter that says we had a meeting at the fire station on this date. These were some of the concerns and the outcomes and the things that came up. We would like to hear from you. Go to our website, or our next meeting is whatever, and then who disseminates that information, because everybody may not get the email, everybody may not look at the news. There has to be some door knocking, some lobbying on getting the information to the people, because they need to know what to do in case of a fire.
Yes.
Especially, and I'll bring this up again, especially the people that don't know how to read or write. The ones who don't know what smoke detector means, or the arrow.
Yep.
You need something to show them, and it's difficult to get in the houses because of the things going on in the house. And everybody don't feel comfortable letting people in uniforms in the house because they think they might get a visitor later on, or they may be there to check up on them and not necessarily say they like. So if they know that at the garden or at Comforce or something, we have the information and the brochures, and somehow these meetings should include some of those voices speaking and leading the meeting and letting you be a guest sometimes, so that the community person that everybody knows and trusts can get them there and saying, I invited the chief here and we decided to have it at the firehouse because it's yours.
I would love it.
You know, I just think you need to increase the, I'm sorry.
Should have taken another run.
So Engine 21 just got back from 13th and Reservoir, and they just got pinged out for another run.
That's what fire trucks do.
That's right.
You know, and without them, we're gonna be running. You know, so my whole thing is that if it needs momentum behind it from the people to say we're gonna miss this when grandmama dies in a fire. We're gonna miss this when the dog dies in the fire, because sometimes people dog mean that much. We're gonna miss this when somebody that has breathing problems gets smoke in there, or have a breathing problem like the diabetic situation that just came up, and the fire truck that has trained EMTs on it can't even get there to start their ministering of what needs to happen. I'm really disgusted this evening that the safety of the people isn't first, that the budget of the government is what is first. With daggone it, the taxes is the budget. And why can't the people say, we don't want the people in government to have higher salaries? They got all these great commercials going and millions of dollars going into that, but we can't keep a fire truck? Wherever that money comes from, there's got to be some philanthropists or some fundraising efforts or something that we could do, and the people could get together, the dollar campaign, the $5 campaign or something, to get a side budget so that it could support the fire department. That's just my opinion. I don't want to keep talking.
No. You're hitting on some salient points here, because I'll tell you one thing that we are doing, again, and we were speaking before, that it's easy enough to be frustrated looking at this budget in a slice of just this budget year now. We're talking ultimately 2 stations closing down. But we've got this long history here of station closures and companies being put out of service. And who knows what the future brings. And I got to tell you what, I have to back up at it, and I back up from it, and I have to look and go, what the heck happens in 2024 and 2025 and 2026 if this continues this way? And there are some very real impacts that it does nobody any good to gloss over. We have a structural deficit where we are obligated through contracts to cover all of these pensions. Now, I am never going to sit here and apologize for a firefighter getting a pension. Never going to hear it come out of my face. And I'll tell you why. We suffer cancer at rates far higher than the average population. The things that they are eyeballs on every day in this city and repeatedly, I'm never going to apologize. But I do know math. And I know that if you're obligated to pay out more than you're bringing in, that's called a structural deficit. That's part one. Part two, and it is not a matter of let's point fingers and let's make someone else, the big bad person in the equation, but state shared revenue has been absolutely stagnant or declining, depending on how you're looking at it. Either case is bad. As costs rise with inflation, we're in a real fix. So part of what we're doing, and make no mistake, I'm just the fire guy. I'm here representing fire and EMS. But we are making a concerted effort upstate to try to get that fixed, either state shared revenues, and that's not just for the fire department, that's the whole city can start to regain some sort of financial health. The unpredictability and the unknown in this it's agonizing enough for me, but we are making a real push with the state legislature right now to try to get state shared revenue, a sales tax, some mix of the two.
But so is the school board for school teachers that they say are underpaid and worried about the pensions and things like that.
That's fair.
If the police department is going to keep getting increases and the fire department is going to get decreases, there's something wrong with that, because you need them both paired up. Because when the police have a situation, the fire department has to come. Maybe I don't know it all totally or how it works, but that's just what it looks like to me. I mean, that's another.
Engine 32, Med 6.
So Med 6 just pulled back up, and now they're heading out.
2825 West Brown Street. choking complete obstruction.
So they're going on a choking
2825
call.
West
Someone's been
Brown
reported
Street.
to have something lodged in their throat, complete obstruction. That's bad news.
I've had 5 heart attacks. Each time, it wasn't the police department that came to take my blood pressure and to see if I needed to go immediately to the hospital or I could decide to stay home. And I was always given great advice by the firefighters. You know, for that. It was the firefighters. And then the paramedics came. And when the paramedics came, the firefighters would tell them his blood pressure is this, his heart rate is this, his blood sugar is this. They gave them all, like you said earlier, they gave them all that information. Then they asked me whatever coherent questions they needed me to answer. And we were able to save my life. Because if the fire department didn't come first, the response time in the hood from the Milwaukee Police Department has to have decreased. Because if you go on 911 for the police's help, it can be disappointing how long it takes for them to answer, and then how long it takes for them to get there, especially if it's a non-emergency situation, but you don't know when it turns into an emergency situation, and by the time they come, somebody has seriously been injured or died, and the fire department has already been there to administer what is needed. Who's not looking at that? And you can't bypass that. And who is the one main person or entities that bring up the idea that we need to close down firehouses? Because that's the person or persons I like to look in the face and say, until you've been punched in the face by one of these situations, you won't know that you need to have some medical attention. And I think that we should just change how we want to save money. I don't know if it's for lawsuits or what we want to save money for. You know, whatever you want to save money for, closing down the fire engines and the firehouses doesn't do it. I do gardening right next to Firehouse 5, and now I'm going to be doing gardening inside the firehouse. We have to have classes, finally for me tonight. I'm developing classes on my own from the Home Safe Program guidelines that you all have, and I wanna develop the JVS, the Junior Volunteer Firefighters. I just made that up, okay? The Junior Volunteer Firefighters, when they learn how to do preventative stuff, the kids, the children, because they're more than likely the ones that'll be in the house with grandma or mom when they go through something traumatic, and if the kids know what to do, the number to call, what to unplug, to get out of the house. You know what I mean?
The kids are usually sharper than the adults from survival life house training.
I think it's sad that we gotta have a meeting like this.
Well, I appreciate you coming nonetheless.
I'm extremely disappointed that we have to have a meeting like this. But if we don't have the meeting, how will they get the understanding?
Well, and that's honest to goodness, this is the larger part of what we're doing here, so that we can say this is what it is and we can get your feedback.
We're gonna need the CVFs too, the Community Volunteer Firefighters. Vaughn?
Well, you already know, Chief, that's why I'm here, because the more these services get taken from the city and resources get taken from y'all, the community has to step up and fill those gaps in. Everything that Andre is talking about is stuff we talked about.
Yep.
Y'all been talking behind my back.
But you know, that's my frustration and concern, is being that that's what ComForce does. I have watched the gradual cutting of firehouses and resources all this time. You know, and it's definitely not conducive to a healthy city. I don't think, I mean, we have not only the budget process, but this falls back on public safety and violence prevention as well, because the difference of these incidents, the difference between someone living or dying could mean the difference when it comes to retaliation in certain instances, and a whole lot of things. I wrote a couple, I mean, my two things are, one, what Andre was talking about is, what do we do? He brought up what do we do with the closed fire stations, right? And I'm trying to figure out how do we collaborate with the community and with folks who want to step up, get them that training, but also do that in conjunction with the fire department, cross train and cross collaborate where we can. Maybe the firehouses can be a hub for training and stuff like that, where we can also not only get folks to step up individually on volunteer basis, but maybe funnel some of those folks into the fire department for more manpower. But even that won't help us if we're studying getting cut and we can't pay those folks and bring them in.
That's fair.
The other piece of it is, where can we go and help advocate for y'all to get the support? I mean, you doing countywide stuff, there's money at the state, nobody is prioritizing this, it seems to me, for us to be in this position. And it's going to affect the community, it's going to affect violence, it's going to affect, so much stuff. And I do not think this is being prioritized at all. And it's putting more strain on myself, my team, the community, folks who need these services. And that's where I'm at. In figuring out what can we do to bring this information to the community. And it does, again, for the electeds and the folks who are over the budget in these different pots of money, they have to respect and listen to what people are telling them we want done with our money and what we need prioritized. So it ain't just on y'all, because we can advocate and ask, but if they don't listen, that puts us back at where we want. So,
I was what I was mentioning before is, I would start thinking long game right now, and I would make sure that we are working out some sort of sustainable funding solution with the state shared revenue or sales tax. The reason I say that is, we ain't gonna be worried about just 2 fire stations in 2024 or 2025. If this don't work and we don't get something from the state, you're gonna wish we were only closing 2. That's how bad the projections are. And that's not my numbers, that's what has been coming out of the city for a couple of years here, and now it's looming ever closer.
Is ARPA an option? Can the county allocate some funds?
I'm not sure what the county has, but I'll tell you this much: a ton of ARPA funds have been allocated this year and in the projected.
To you guys?
Yeah, just to get us to the point we're at, and we're still like lagging behind. And the problem with relying on the ARPA funds, it's excellent for the maintenance of the city services for now, but it goes away. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody knows that. It goes away. And if we don't have some sort of underfill for that. Now, we have the Milwaukee Fire Department in 2016, my predecessor saw it, and finally, with advocacy and pushing with other fire and EMS providers around the state legislature, who we can sit and say like, oh, they're hostile towards Milwaukee, or they can say Milwaukee isn't doing what we want. We can all just keep throwing stuff back and forth at each other. But this, we pushed through and got pushed through ground emergency medical transport, GEMT. And what that is that's a reimbursement program that allows us to recover some of the lost funds for the EMS work that we do in such high numbers. So that is turning on January 1st. And DHS at the state level is figuring out exactly how we're going to administer all that. We're all clawing around trying to find a more sustainable solution, because right now, the couple of crumbs on the table, all it does to all of us is we're all fighting each other. We're all fighting each other for the same exact little pile of crumbs there. And what we really should be looking for is, where did the loaf of bread go? Mm-hmm. And the loaf of bread is with the state right now. And so we need to be at the state. We need to talk to anybody that will listen to us. Please help the city of Milwaukee, because we can come up with all these reimagined plans for what we should be doing. In the meanwhile, this city is hurting. This city is in pain right now.
Well, Chief, your bronze, I said that was my last statement. But do you work for the fire department in your community?
Community member.
You're still quiet.
Just
Well, we can't get a word in edgewise.
And he won't if you don't speak up. I'm thinking this, and with the closing of the mental health hospitals, there's an increase of panhandlers and people on the street that have no addresses. And so their medical emergencies are right wherever they are.
Sure.
The other day I saw a woman on 21st and North Avenue. She was struggling so hard right on the corner, and the cars were just riding past. We stopped to ask if she needed help. She wouldn't respond to us, and tried to call 911 to get a response necessarily. And I was just concerned about, what do those people do?
Sure.
Who goes to see about them when we don't have enough fire trucks and paramedics to respond?
That's a fair question. It's something we've been grappling with at the city level is, and I don't know if it's an increase in people who are suffering with mental health concerns, or if we're just more aware of it now, and we can put a name on it, so we can identify something, you know. But it would certainly seem with, does that go any louder? Maybe we could run it over the PA system so I'd fall off the bench next time it goes out. But we have people who are just being exposed over and over and over and over and over again to just wicked, crazy, evil, violent crime, all the visual stuff that goes with it, but just that there's trauma that causes a change in a person's brain to experience that over and over again. The constant adrenaline rush and then the downside, adrenaline rush, downside, that changes how people behave. I'm not an expert on that. I'm just talking about things I've been learning in the past few years. That does nothing but further harm people who are already suffering from all the other stuff. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
It's safety and survival before you can get to security and affiliation and any sense of we're actually like having good times here together, right? I think that's probably a long ways off, but I hate to do it. Do you have any questions, sir?
No, I don't at the time. Thank you. I kind of just wanted to come to learn more.
I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Probably have to go soon. He's not going to last.
No, well, you know what? I gotta leave in 45 seconds. We gotta get to our next meeting, so. I really appreciate you coming out though. And you know what? Come
Thank you
on
for
back,
having us.
come on back, climb around on the fire trucks here. You climb around the trucks and try on all this stuff. He's like, no, I'm tired now. I'm done.
Tired now. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, look, but finding yourself in the future, you got a question, stop by, ask these guys. If they can't, they'll get an email to one of us,
Okay.
and we'll work on getting a response for you.
Excellent. That'd be great. Yeah, we walk by all the time. So
Absolutely, stop by,
we'll
say
do
hi.
anything we can to support the firehouse.
I really appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
You're
Have a
welcome.
good night. You guys brought up, and I'm not trying, we just have to get to the next one, but you guys brought up some good ideas that I guess I'd like to explore, like 100%. If you guys are having anything in the communities or with different groups you're involved in, and you want anybody from the fire department to come, we would love to, because what you're talking about, that's, people trust firefighters. I mean, they'll open their doors for us. And the uniform thing, you and I have talked about that. I push back against the uniform thing. If you have this uniform on or this patch, people largely let us in. I mean, they don't even pay us notice half the time. But still, you, I mean, that's patch on another whole level, right? Because it's where you live, family, friends, neighbors that you've known your whole lives. We'll never know everybody our whole lives. So if you're having meetings, we'd love to come on, anything we can do, seriously.
We appreciate that. At least, I mean, I do.
Yeah.
You too, don't you, Vaughn?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You still
Yeah,
too?
I was you know, we can do something live stream or something in-person meeting or you know, whatever we can. And as far as, you know, the stuff Andre was talking about, if y'all have information that we can disseminate out in the community, we got the Christmas program coming up, so if it's anything that people need to know, that we can go out, send out the gift bags.
Excellent.
You know, we willing to put this stuff.
I
Whoever we
think
can.
I think the union is putting together volunteers and possibly some packages. I don't know if they've gotten out yet, but they're for the Christmas program.
But the powers that be need to know and understand that there are people in the community that are already working that are seriously serious about not seeing these fire trucks go and these firehouses closed down. But until we get it together and get the money situation together, you gotta come to the same people that you go to when you want their vote to get in office. You gotta go to those same people and knock on the door and say, listen, what do you all need to survive? Because until we get the resources in the house that the people need, and they keep leaving home angry and they hungry and they already have a gun, they're gonna shoot the next person that makes them mad or has what they wanna take back to the house with them. We gotta go in the house or at least meet them on the porch. We have to do it. But you can't just keep disregarding those of us that really deal with the bad stuff. And to feel like you're on the bottom running, it'd be nice to have some wings to fly.
Amen. Thank you. I really appreciate you folks coming out. Thanks for coming out. Hey, I was gonna tell you something on a slightly cooler note. This is the first fire station that anybody in my family ever worked at.
Well, I thought you was gonna say that made pizza for the community.
Wow. Wow.
Yes,
That hurt my heart, Andre.
yes.
That hurt my
You
heart.
guys make some good pizza.
110
Just in
years
time, my
of
phone's in the top.
27?
All right, y'all.
No.
Oh, but you already know.
Okay, I was gonna say, not sure which station you're be closest to where you are.
Thanks for coming.
Yep, no problem.
Is this around 7:05? Absolutely. Back.
I don't think so.
What you gonna do, son? What you gonna do?
I had to take my son to the grocery store. Yeah, so he can stop eating my stuff and get him some of his own stuff.
Oh, he done got into the pantry.
The pantry, the refrigerator, the snack box, whatever he can find.
Is he with you? Is he with you?
Yeah, my 13-year-old live with me now.
Hey, man.
Okay, that's pretty much
Working
it.
out.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
It's rough.
Thank you.
I gotta run to the next one. Vaughn, Andre,
Yes, sir.
Chief.
and thank you.